it's my pleasure to introduce to you this conference on building African institutions for Africans. As you are probably all aware, this conference is organized in the framework of the celebration of the 25th anniversary of strategies. Now, let me introduce to you who strategies is. Maybe I know most of you, you know already strategies, but with this presentation, you will probably know more about it. Just a second for me to share my screen with you. Great. So let me introduce strategies to you in figures and letters. Strategies is an international organization, an international consulting firm specialized in leadership and management. We consider ourselves as organizational doctors providing solutions to challenges faced by organizations. We provide services to organizations, including facilitation, training, capacity building, motivational speaking, coaching, advisory, the package of the organizational development, and of course, project monitoring and evaluation. We consider ourselves to be the indispensable partner of ambitious and proactive organizations that are over hundreds clients that we've been working with in the private sector and the development sector in areas such as agriculture, peace and security, decentralization, and so on. We started in 1995 with our first client that was Kamoa Air Liquide, and since then our longest partner is GIZ. When we talk of who we partner with in terms of multinationals, these are those we consider to be our strong partners in the banking sector, the energy sector, and the telecom in Cameroon and on the continent and all over the world. When we talk of development organizations, we have a very strong experience and rich experience, with African organizations such as the African Union, the Pan-African Farmers Organization, the International Conference for the Great Lakes region, with bilaterals and multilaterals organizations such as GIZ, the German Corporation, the European Union, the World Bank, and so on. And when we talk of NGOs, we can name Humanity United, the Kimberley Process, especially the Civil Society Coalition, Vital Voices, and Impact. And as an organization, we stand for values that are those you see. We believe in people, people being given a fair chance, people's innate ability to build and succeed, and so on. And through this, our key principles is the belief in people. And through our actions from local to global, we impact millions of lives with our work, and more than 70 people have been working with strategies so far. So that's what we're proud of. And we've been working from Africa to the world in more than 40 countries, in America, here in Africa, in Europe, and Asia, and the Middle East. And this is what we can consider to be the footprint of strategies. That's why we say, that's what we say, we are all over the world and we impact the world of millions of people. And today we are really proud to celebrate with you our 25th anniversary from above and going beyond. This is the introduction of strategies that I can share with you. And now I'm going to hand over to our CEO, who is going to moderate the conference itself with you. So now I'm handing over to you, Ka.
Thank you very much, Baba. Welcome to everybody who is joining us for this conference. Thank you so much for coming to celebrate with us. 25 years, a quarter of a century. Baba has just given you a brief overview of some of the things that we have been able to do and places where we have been able to work over the last 25 years. And now we thought that having supported African institutions for the last 25 years, having been in situations where we bring solutions, we work with institutions on solutions for our continent, we thought it would be fitting to spend time to talk about building African institutions for Africans. And to do that, I'm going to start off, before I introduce you to our very wonderful panel, I'm going to start off by us taking a quick look at some of the key figures and the key trends on our continent. So I too am going to share my screen with you for a few minutes. So if we take a look at the key trends that are impacting and that are impacted by African institutions, we know, of course, that we are a continent with great potential. Today, we are 1.3 billion people. That is about 17% of the world population. And with the African Continental Free Trade Area, we are the largest free trade area in the world. Africa is, of course, a mineral reserve for the world. We hold 30% of the world's minerals, and we are the largest producers of minerals such as platinum, cobalt, tantalum, copper, coltan, and diamonds. So without Africa, we could not have this conference, because without our minerals, there would be no cell phones, there would be no computers, the world would not be able to function in its virtual mode as it is doing now. On top of that, Africa has about 1/4 of the world's arable land, even if we only generate 9% of the world's agricultural production. So much potential in this continent. However, we have to stop and say today that this potential is not translating itself into services for citizens. We have not been able to construct institutions that deliver for Africans. Only 1 out of every 4 Africans, less than 1 out of every 4 Africans, has access to safe drinking water in sub-Saharan Africa. About 51% of Africans do not have access to electricity. Sorry, about 51% have access, about 49% do not have access to electricity. Only about 28% of Africans have access to basic sanitation facilities that they are not sharing with other households. If we look at education, we discover that sub-Saharan Africa has the vast majority, 9 out of 10 children in sub-Saharan Africa are what is called learning poor. This means they are either out of school completely or they are in school, but they are not meeting the basic threshold for the educational standard. This is, if you compare us here, on the other end of the spectrum, you have East Asia and the Pacific, where close to 80% of children are not learning poor, so they are in school and up to learning standards, and about 85% for Europe and Central Asia. So we have the biggest exclusion rate in sub-Saharan Africa for education. About 20% of our children between 6 and 11 years old are not in school. And we have the highest rate of out-of-school children in the world, about 30 million children in Africa. Again, all of these minerals, all of this economic potential is not translating into economies that work for Africans. We have a lot of employment. Unemployment in Africa is actually quite low, but most employment is in the informal sector, about 85.8%. Out of that, about 66% are vulnerable jobs. Vulnerable in terms of the safety and security of the job, vulnerable in terms of the remuneration of the job. And of course, we have a poverty rate of over 40% throughout the continent. So about 431 million people who are living with less than $1.90 a day. Unfortunately, COVID has made the situation even worse. For the first time in 25 years, the African economy is going to contract this year by 3.3%. And in areas like agriculture, we are seeing a drop in productivity. There are trade tensions, and we are losing jobs. So what is unquestionable is that due to COVID, these 431 million people who are living in poverty are actually going to, that number is actually going to increase. If we look at freedom and democracy, we are not doing so well. So in this poster from Freedom House, the vast majority of African states are not free. This big purple swath that you see are countries which are not free. The yellow are those that are partially free. And you can see that only at the tip there in Southern Africa and with some small spots there in West Africa, and over here in the Indian Ocean with Mauritius, do you see countries that are actually considered as free. Conflict, unfortunately, is increasing in Africa. And we see here the rise of the Salafi jihadi movement, which has moved all the way across the continent. Over 50% of African states are today affected by insurgency of some sort. And you can see there the dark black countries that have active insurgency, the grays are low-level insurgency, and you see that West, Central, and Eastern Africa are all affected, and we are even seeing some effects in Southern Africa today. All are greatly impacted. About 29 million people are currently forcibly displaced in Africa. This is an increase since last year, about 16% increase. And we see that conflict has increased in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Central African Republic, Ethiopia, and the Sahel, and is contributing to this forced displacement. Faced with all of this, we have created a lot of institutions. We have not counted all of them here, but to give you an idea, to try to face these challenges, Africa has, in terms of quantity, created a lot of institutions. From the 5 regional organizations that you know, representing Northern Africa, Eastern Africa, Western Africa, Southern Africa, and Central Africa, various organizations that have been created to address questions of peace and security, economic institutions that are supposed to face up to these challenges, but they are not quite delivering. And that's going to be our conversation for today. Meanwhile, it's important and very encouraging to know that there are some African countries that have institutions that are delivering to their citizens. If we take a look, for example, at some of the best performers, Mauritius, Botswana, and Seychelles, we will discover that they have been able to provide water to almost all of their population. They have been able to provide electricity to the vast majority of their population. They have literacy rates which are nearly at 100%, and as a result, poverty in these countries, in Mauritius, it is less than 1%, it's less than 0.5%, it's at 0.2%. In Botswana, it is at 14.5%, and in the Seychelles, it is at 1.2%. So these countries tell us that faced with these challenges, Africa can deliver. It is possible for us to build the institutions that can actually meet with the challenges that Africa is facing. So, with that scene set, I am going to introduce to you to our wonderful panel. And I am going to ask my colleagues to make sure that they're pinning the videos. I'm going to ask all of the panelists to please turn on their videos, and ask my colleagues to pin the videos of the panelists as I introduce them. So we have an amazing panel of women who have helped to build extraordinary institutions for Africa and who continue to do so. I'm going to start with Dr. Obi Ezekwesili. Dr. Obi is an amazing, amazing African leader. She was candidate for the presidency of Nigeria in 2019. She is currently the founder of the governance transformation initiative called Fix Politics. She's co-founder of a movement that we all heard about around the world, Bring Back Our Girls. She was a former vice president for the Africa region at the World Bank. She's co-founder of Transparency International. She has been minister in Nigeria, Minister of Education, and at the base, she is a chartered accountant. And I have to say, most importantly, she's a great big sister, a wonderful person to be in touch with and working with on these questions that concern our continent. Welcome, Dr. Obi.
Hi, Ka. Congratulations.
Hello. Thank you. And thank you for joining our celebration. Our next panelist is Ambassador Liberata Mulamula. She is currently a visiting scholar and acting director of the Institute for African Studies at the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. She is the former ambassador of Tanzania to the United States years ago. She is a former and first female permanent secretary in the Tanzania Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. And currently, she's a member of the UN Secretary General's Advisory Group on Peace Building Fund and independent eminent persons of the UN Peace Building Architecture Review. Ambassador Mula.
Thank you, Carl.
Yes. Great, thank you. I am going to go ahead and introduce Dr. Deko Aden Mohammed. Dr. Mohammed is a medical doctor by profession. She's an obstetrician gynecologist. She's also CEO of the Dr. Hawa Abdi Foundation that manages Hope Village in Somalia, where they have offered care and community health care to thousands of displaced Somalis. The village has a 400-bed hospital, a primary school, a high school, a women's education center, agricultural projects, and so on. That was not enough. Dr. Mohammed went on to found the Hagala Institute for Equitable Healthcare for Africa, which focuses on community healthcare, medical and environmental health research, and capacity building for medical professionals. Welcome, Dr. Mohammed. Welcome, Deko. So glad to have you on board.
Thank you, Ka. Congratulations.
Thank you. And as Baba mentioned earlier, my name is Ka Wala. I am the CEO of Strategies, which is celebrating our 25 years. I am also a political leader in Cameroon. I was candidate for the presidency of Cameroon in 2011. I am president of the Cameroon People's Party, and professionally do over 30 local governments, 5 national governments, and 7 regional and continental institutions. I have the pleasure of trying to facilitate this extraordinary panel today, and also from time to time give my own points of view. Thank you very much to all of our panelists for deciding to join us. And I am going to go straight, Dr. Obi. I have heard you talk about policy, institutions, and investment as the pathway for Africa. What are the key factors? What are the key elements that we need in African institutions in order to deliver for African citizens? What is it that the rest of us are not doing that Mauritius, Seychelles, and Botswana are doing? How do we build these institutions to deliver?
Well, thank you so very
Dr.
much,
Obi?
Ka, and what a delight to be on the panel with my other 2 sisters. And I think that together we can all ask you, how older than 25 are you if you're celebrating 25 years of the amazing work that you have done with your team. Well done, Ka. Well done to your team. Excellent work indeed. To your specific question, I think that it's really crucial that we should situate the conversation on institutions in Africa around the concept of good governance. When you think of society, every society becomes a society of people who have agreed to be together and then to solve common problems through public mechanisms. And that's the basis for which we talk about governance, and we talk about government. Besides government, we of course have the private sector, that's the markets, and then we've got the civil society. Government is the overarching amongst the three sectors that we see in society. To the extent that governance systems are not solid, to the extent that they are not strong and competent, to that extent, are you going to have difficulty in having the right policies? So for the right policies to happen, government has to be effective. Government has to have the knowledge and the capacity to deliver on sound policies. For governments to make the right priorities of investments in the provision of basic goods and services that businesses as well as citizens need in order to thrive in their creativity or their innovation, you need to have competence, you need to have capable governance. And so at the end of the day, you find that institutions really matter a lot because it is within the concept of institutions that when you unwrap it, you find leadership as a core component of it. Institutions are not simply codification of ideas. They really represent the way a people do their things. How do we do the things that we do as a continent? How do we do governance? When you compare what you were showing of more or less, benchmark countries for the continent, you would find that Botswana, to which I can speak to very precisely, sound policies, competent governance, competent management of governance are based on the political culture of public accountability and good leadership, effective leadership, and then building systems and institutions that outlasted the early leaders and founders of Botswana was an important story toward their bucking the trend of countries that got trapped in the problems of Dutch disease that follows with the discovery of natural resources like diamond, which is what they have and supply to the world. So if you looked at all that I have said, it is very clear that Africa is struggling with its governance. And until we can resolve what it is that went wrong with governance, because I do not, history doesn't bear to the fact that we always had problems with leadership. Our problems with leadership and therefore governance became a major issue following the inability of the continent to align existing systems of leadership that we had pre-colonial Africa with the new modern systems of public administration based on democratic principles that we inherited. And so that alienation of these two worlds, as it were, has caught us in the trap where public leadership does not result in effective outcomes of the kind that you were showcasing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Obi. I am swinging between, speaking of delivery and services, our internet is quite bad in Cameroon right now. And so I'm swinging between machines and connections, but I think you can still see me. So we are retaining public leadership We are talking about policies. We are talking about a lack of governance that has not enabled us to deliver on some of these issues. Ambassador Mulamula, you have been at the head of, you have been part of national institutions, you have been at the head of regional institutions, you have worked internationally. What are some of the key ingredients that we are missing? What is it that we are not doing well enough?
Thank you, Carl. Let me first start by congratulating you. I can't believe that you are 25 years of strategies. When I was first introduced to you, this is about maybe 12 years ago, you were giving us a background how you started on a dining table.
Yes.
Of course, I know some who have made it started in the garage, but you started on a dining table. And then here you are. So congratulations, very proud of you. I can't talk about the political side. I know what you have been through, but I'm the product of the good work of strategies that helped us build the capacity of the institution you have just mentioned. But I'm also happy to share this platform with my dear sister Obil. We always meet somewhere. Now it is virtual, but so happy to see you. You're still strong and vibrant as ever. But also, I'm so happy also to share platform with Dr. Mohammed. She's, because normally when we meet, it's either diplomats, politicians. Now we have a gynecologist in the room. So it's quite an interesting panel. But also, Carl, I wanted to ask whether it was by design or by choice or just coincidence that it is only women. At the panel. Of course, we had the introduction from one of our male colleagues, but then I can see the panel is women, so we'll come to that.
Yes.
But this reminds me of the saying that if you want to have something done, give it to a woman. If you want something said, well said, give it to a man. But also women means, as Chaka Chaka defined it, women means well-organized men. So here we are. Anyway, coming to your questions, I think, of course, Obi, I think she has covered all that we can always talk about when you talk of African institutions. And sometimes when I'm asked to speak about my experience with the institutions that I was privileged to head, it's like I'm saying the obvious. One, of course, as was raised by Obi, it is an issue of governance, it's an issue of leadership, it's an issue of accountability. But from my own experience, especially with the having been given the privilege to start up this sub-regional organization, I think what was key, whether we have succeeded or not, the key factor was ownership. Ownership, first and foremost, ownership of the problem, ownership of the solutions, but also ownership of the institution, whether it's vision, whether it is mission. And this ownership, of course, starts from the highest level, at the level of the heads of state who decided to establish this institution, but also ownership among the citizens. And when I talk of the citizens, I'm not talking about the populist language, but the citizens. This organization was unique in the sense that while it was political driven, state-led, but it incorporated or included all segments of the society. The women, the youth, the civil society, the academia, the media, everyone was seen as part of this project, call it a project, that to have sustainable peace, security, stability, and development, it cannot be left to governments only, but that every member of the society, every person, and talk of people-centered, I think this was a good reflection of that. So this is one of the things that ownership, but also I took the ownership principle among even the employees, that if they don't feel that they are part and parcel of this project, of this organization, that they sacrifice for the common good, then it would have been difficult for me. If you get people just they are there because they get there at the end of the month, they get their paycheck, it would not have worked, especially when you have only few staff or human resources, and you have few, of course, limited financial resources. So I want to underline the issue of ownership. Ownership, I want to underline it. But two, which was also in passing mentioned by Obi, is the people and culture. This culture, of course, can be defined in many perspectives. But then what I've seen, and maybe this is what has made the other countries succeed, is to be able to recognize, of course, hard work, but also the talent, the competencies, the knowledge. So if you embrace this, and it becomes a culture of the people, of the organizations, of the institutions, this is what drives these institutions to succeed. And finally, of course, I said there are many issues you can talk about, but I want to underline the issue of leadership. Leadership, of course, I remember the speech that then President Obama made when he came to Addis Ababa, or it was in Cairo, where I mentioned this, that what we need, of course, we don't need strong leaders, we need strong institutions. But for me, I still say, if you have wrong leaders, I said a leader can make it or break an institution, can break a community, can break a society. So issue of leadership, we should not take them lightly. And this is why also I decided in my retirement to teach about women and leadership as key that will propel us to another level. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Mulamula. So I think very interesting point you brought up about ownership. And I think that's one indicator we can look at when we are talking about institutions, is who is in the institution, who is running it, but also who is it delivering to, whom does it consider as its clients, as the people whom it has to satisfy, whom is it consulting, and how do we get this ownership? And then you've really talked about this aspect of talent, hard work, competencies, a merit-based system where you are bringing people in based on merit, you are advancing them based on merit, and you are able to build a culture of excellence. Thank you so much, finally, for coming back on leadership and institutions. I am amongst those who never quite agreed with that Obama quote because it's great to say, and I understood what he meant, that we should get away from the personality culture and go towards the institutional culture. But who builds institutions? It is good leaders who build good institutions. Somebody has to make that decision. Somebody has to have the vision. Somebody has to take the hard decisions that build good institutions. So leadership, both you and Dr. Obi have said it, leadership is at the center. I want to go to Dr. Mohammed, who is, I'm going to tell you the secret of this panel, Ambassador Mulamula, in just a minute. And Dr. Mohammed is, she's the youngest person on this panel. And listening to her and preparing for this, I was struck by the fact that she's the youngest one, she's a very young African leader who has done amazing things. And she talks already about sustainability. Dr. Mohammed, please talk about sustainability and what it means for our institutions.
Hi, Ka. First of all, congratulations for your commitment. So you have amazing leadership skills, which is commitment, 25 years, and I hope more to come. I'm honored to listen to you all day. I could just listen, be part of it. I think me being in an environment of humanitarian in Somalia and conflict, and keep fundraising. This is vicious cycle where you every year you fundraise and your funding are going away and you go back and ground zero. That's the one pushed me to think about sustainability, how I can sustain my organization, how I can build a healthcare system where accessible to the community, it's affordable, so I don't have to be dependent on international community. I don't have to be dependent on someone outside. So that's what really put me to thinking forward about sustainability. And I think having a strong institution is very important. But in the same time, as you say, the leader is very important. It's a hand to hand. It's like a chicken and egg, I think. So in Somalia, I cannot do anything because there's no government. There's no effective institutions in the place. And healthcare is one of the major indicators. I think I haven't seen your presentation in CAR. The three wonderful countries in Africa are progressing, but there was no health indicators. And the frustration it has in Africa, I'm really frustrated, is how we are putting out of our continent millions of dollars as a health tourism, going somewhere else and treating ourselves. When we have a talented people in a continent, when our talent is around the world, working and treating others, why not to bring them? To do that, you need to have a strong institution in place in healthcare, in security, in finance. It's the people who have a job, so could afford to pay those wonderful services. So I think sustainability is everything to me, and sustainability should be started when you're trying to build institutions. If I want to build this institution, how it could sustain it, in the beginning might be without you. That's what we need to start in Africa. Building an institution is in 20 years from now, and 50 years I'm gone. Who's going to run these institutions? How I can set up the policies and strategies that can work without me. So that's a part of sustainability. It's not where I started only financially. Now I'm thinking in my hospital, if something happens to me, who can treat my patient in a better way? Who could continue my village to providing a basic services? So that's to me and sustainability. In Africa, we are the most richest. You show us the slide. It's very sad to have all these resources and we cannot afford to pay a quality healthcare. We cannot afford to pay a quality medication produced within the continent, within our continent. So it's very important to think in sustainability. And I urge all of you in the political level, in everywhere, whatever you're doing, think about how to sustain this program, how to sustain anything we are doing. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Deco. Thank you for really emphasizing on that point about financial sustainability. And sometimes when I look at organizations like yours, in some ways in Africa, we have encouraged people to substitute for the state. The state is not doing its job, and we encourage civil society and we encourage private sector organizations to go ahead and do the job. And of course, if people are dying, if people are sick, we need to take care of them. But we also have to have the sustainability of the state. And you've talked about financial sustainability, you've talked about succession plans. And when I bring all of this together with what has been said by Dr. Obi, by Ambassador Mulamula, my question then, and before I go to the question, I see participants with their hands up. We are going to get to you in just a few minutes. So we will be taking questions from participants in the audience. I'm giving our speakers a chance to lay the groundwork a little bit, and also for any of the questions already in the chat. So don't worry, we will be getting to your questions. We'll open up to questions from the audience. But I do want to go back to you now to ask is it realistic? In Africa, I sometimes get the feeling that we want to develop without functional states. We want somehow development to happen. I will maybe challenge Ambassador Mula a little bit to say, we sometimes go to regional level. We want regional organizations to somehow miraculously function when their member states are not functional. So I want us to address this question of the functional state. How important is it? Can we advance without it? Dr. Obi.
It is impossible to advance without the functional state. And the reason is that, as I said in my opening, the state is the overarching sector amongst the three sectors of society. It has that coordination role. It has the visionary role. The reason whether the country is developed or developing or emerging, one thing that we know is that the role of government and the expectation from government is the same. The citizens want an improvement in the quality of life that they can have, their standard of living, their security, their capacity to take advantage of opportunities and thrive. It is just similar to humanity, that wheresoever they are found, they want to be able to and function effectively. Now, the second part of that is that it is only the nation state that has the scale, the capacity to act at scale. Little interventions are important because they really also make for what collaboration should be in society. But the little interventions, I look at my dear sister, Dr. Mohammed, doing what she's doing in Somalia, in the absence of government. She's trying her bit. And we must acknowledge that kind of work. She's a heroine for doing what she does. But I'm sure there are days that she wishes that there was government and that there were systems that could enable the necessary policy dialogues, because in some of the interventions that you're doing, you just need a really significant policy to change things. And it is government that can give you that kind of policy. In some of the things that she does, she just needs a last mile investment in some important aspects that private sector would have no incentive to get into. Whenever there is what we call market failure, government needs to be available to step in to provide the public good that citizens need in order to function effectively. When that is absent, you're going to have the kind of extreme poverty that we see in countries of fragility, as well as even countries like mine. Nigeria hasn't fought a war again since after the civil war of the 60s, but it almost resembles a conflict, country. And that's because of the absence of effective governance. So what do we then do in order to fill this gap? I think to the question that how do you even begin to do almost what we call state formation? It's like the building blocks toward the emergence of this thing called governance, of this thing called governmental systems, and we have to start at the base. And the base really is about what our dear sister, Ambassador Mula said, of ownership. But who is going to arbitrate the conversation on ownership? The state today is owned, but it is owned by a cabal in most of Africa's society, because our aberration of what politics is has meant that the nation state has been, I call it, pocketized by a very small, a minute, range of people who have somehow bubbled to the top in the absence of a proper contestation for the political space for public leadership. I know what you've seen in Cameroon. I'd love to come to Cameroon and fight that battle with you. But look at the citizens. The citizens often don't understand the kind of battle you're fighting, and you're fighting for them, but they can't see it because their imagination is captured by a very terrible definition of what it means to be a citizen in a country. The citizens actually think that those who misgovern them are doing them a favor. If they can do a tiny droplet of some benevolent act, that amounts to fulfilling the social contract. So we have to go to the base. We need to have an enlightened and empowered electorate. We need to have citizens who know that they deserve much more than they are getting, and who are ready to stand up to the political class and decide that they want to negotiate. They want to negotiate a social contract. There is a social contract that must bind those that run governmental systems and those that they govern. And in most of Africa, we don't have it. The second thing is that we need to begin to build back our social capital. Social capital was one of the things that you could always count on African communities to have, because we're very relational in Africa. So the community spirit meant that you could do things on the basis of trust. Trust is the heart of social capital. Now we lost that. And so you see so much multiple conflicts that just erupt because the mentality of poverty is making people feel that when somebody gets, then the other person loses. This whole sense of the winner takes it all. And that's meaning that Africans are busy fighting over little pieces of pies. I'm not one of those excited about, oh, we've got columbite, we've got iron, we've got gold, we've got silver. I don't care about what we've got and what we offer to the world, because we are not in any way maximizing the values of natural and resources endowment that we have. We didn't add anything to it. So it's just God-given, divine providence, bestowed all of this on us. When our politicians talk about those endowments, it annoys me, and we should stop enabling them. What we should be talking about is how we translate everything that we represent today to the world into a world-class human capital that is innovative, that can solve problems, our own local problems, solve national problems, solve regional problems, solve global problems. We need to be competitive. We have citizens across our countries that have shown the world that they can play at the same level and the same standard of performance. When the enabling environment gives them all that they need as the wind behind their sail to really be great people. We have a continent that is drawing back its citizens. Our governance has to be innovated. We need to innovate it. And it falls on the table of enlightened African citizens to understand that the problem needs to be solved at the base. And that means we need to stop being highfalutin. We need to stop being, high order minded, and just go to the base and begin to engage in a way that makes our citizens see that they have an effect, a very important office. That office of the citizen is the greatest office of any African. The only thing that matches it, but not close enough, is the office of the president, which is the highest political office. But constitutionally, the citizen is greater than the president, because the legitimacy of the president depends on the action of the citizen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Obi. So much. Back to the grassroots. Back to working from the base, building up citizens who are ready to negotiate the social contract. I think you have put your finger in the middle, in the middle of the pie, and in the middle of what is wrong in this moment. The work that is needed for citizens to understand that they occupy the office of the citizen, that they occupy the highest office of the land, and that every other person only gets their office from them. Ambassador Mula, you had started on this by talking about ownership, by talking about the fact that, the institutions must be owned by women, by young people, by those who are marginalized in the society. So I wonder if you can build on this a little bit. How do we do this work? How do we go beyond it being words that we are saying on panels and so on? How do we do the work that gets African citizens builds up their power enough for them to be ready to renegotiate the social contract?
Thank you, Carl. Of course, it's always very much enlightening to listen to my sister, Dr. Obi, because she has covered almost all the entire spectrum. But let me start by saying that, first of all, as they say, I always like these sayings, that ships don't sink because of the water around them. Ships sink because of the water that gets in them. So I'm saying this because when you talk of the non-functional state, what makes the state function? And being an academia, we like definitions. Let's get the general understanding of what we mean by a state, and then we'll come to your question. Because if the understanding and the definition is that a state is a body of people that is politically organized and especially occupies a clearly defined territory and is sovereign, but also a state that the political system that governs such a body of people constitutes parts of a nation. So I'm saying every time we talk of the state, is like we ask ourselves, what is that? What is that animal? The state is us. The state is the body of people. But where we go wrong is those, as I said, people we put in the sea, in the ship that gets into the ship and sinks the ship. This is where the problem is. So for me, I would want to argue that for the state to function, you need functioning institutions and vice versa. But then when you talk of the body of people, always, and what we have seen in terms of the leadership, in terms of who governs these states, it's at the exclusion of the majority of the people. That body of people, you find almost half of that body of people are left out, and these are the women. So the question is, how? Because now, especially now, the trajectory has changed to admit and recognize that we cannot have what Dr. Mohammed was saying, sustainability, whether it's sustainability of development, sustainability of financing, if you leave out this critical mass of people. So how do we do it? One, for those who have been in politics, Dr. Obi, you know, it's always about numbers. To be voted is to get the numbers. If at all it's not manipulated, you need the numbers. So this critical mass of the population provides those numbers. But also we have seen that where women have been involved, where they have been heads of state, where they have come as we have come in today, or where they are in business, as Carl, the way you have started the strategies and to bring it at this level, because it is when I got to know you, it was essentially all women. So it is not the question of how, it's not the question of why, it's not the question of what, but what it has to be, we have to do the right thing. And we see that whatever you bring in, I've become an activist of women. I can take the whole session talking about this, but it is the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do. You saw, of course, I said, if there is an election on the day of voting, the majority on the line are the women. But then where do we lose them? It's because of the politics because of the patriarchal system. But then we have this critical mass that can bring change if you believe that it can be done. I mentioned that in my organization, when I was reading the International Conference on the Great Lakes region, what made me to tick or be recognized is because of this inclusivity, leaving no one behind, recognizing that everyone has a role to play. You don't have to be politically correct, but this, as it is from the humanity point of view, that was the path I took. And that's what made me think. I mean, even getting the strategies, at first, you can recall that the women, I mean, the men were very resistant, said, what are these young women going to tell us? What are they going to teach us? But then when you came with your knowledge, with your expertise, I mean, the survival of the Great Lakes region, I owe it to you. So when I'm asked why women, how to do it, I mean, it is the right thing to do, and we have done it, we have seen it. So now why don't we do it? This is the question. I thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that key factor about our success. And I'll step in here to say how this came about to be a panel of women. We did not start out to pick a panel of women. We started out to pick amongst the people with whom we have worked and with whom we have networked over the years. We started thinking of examples of great institutions and people who had built them and strong leaders we had known over time. And when we picked the people, we looked down and said, oh my goodness, it's 3 women. So I think that it is essential. The 3 of you are extraordinary leaders who have built institutions in at so many different levels, in so many different ways. And I think that the combination of the things that you have talked about, strong leadership, good policies, inclusivity, getting every single part of the society involved, and building up their capacity to be powerful enough to negotiate, powerful enough to say no even to you as leaders is something that all of you have exercised and is really what we are seeing in the ability to build great institutions. Deco, I want to come to you to ask you, what is the role? When I knew you, you were diaspora. you were not living on the continent, and now you are back. And I think you're still kind of in those 2 worlds. And I want to know, what is the role of the diaspora? What should the African diaspora be doing to help us build the kinds of institutions that can deliver for our continent?
Thank you. It's just an honor to listen to you, Ambassador, and Dr. Obi. It's amazing. I'm blown, and I'm honored to be with you in the panel. As a diaspora, we all have been traveled and lived in somewhere else. To me, I will, in the side of my colleagues and my Africans in diaspora, the advice I will give is we should spend our time when we're out of our continent to get as much as possible knowledge. That's what we need to. We don't want to waste our time in just to sit and completely until we own beautiful countries. We are, wondering, the houses we see and beautiful high rises. No, we have a work waiting for us back home in the continent in Africa. So please get strong knowledge as much as you can, no matter what. Even if you're cleaner and you know how to do perfect cleaning, the continent will benefit to you. We all don't have to be professors and politicians and doctors. So the country needs more than that, our continent. Secondly, in Somalia, if I take example, I think we survived lasted 30 years because of diaspora. There was no state, there was not functioning, there was chaos, and international NGOs couldn't provide everything. So the money that was sent by diaspora, that's how my country survived. And now seeing the diaspora community coming back and rebuilding the nation, it is really, it's heartwarming. It's just beautiful to watch. Mogadishu is rising every day. They're building new homes, no matter what happens. The explosion happens, you know, the people attack them. The people try to scare them, but they are resistant. They're coming back to build our country. So I think African diaspora should come back with a strategy and plan to build. No one will clean up or build. What I have this metaphor in, I always tell my friends, no one will flush our shit. So sorry for my language. Africans has to come back and build. Africans has to come back and do a better job than what our ancestors left. And also take the beautiful culture we have. The problem as diasporas, we're coming back with insecurity. We're coming back with a Western ideology. We're thinking, oh, our people are not good enough. You know, they're doing things wrong. So that attitude, we should not come back with a continent. We should come back with open-minded, want to learn more, study, listen our elders, the beautiful culture, and do better. We should do better, not come with Western ideology. That's what I would recommend in diaspora who's coming back. And I'm honored. And my mom taught me that in many ways when I come back. And also one thing we need to think about it, when diaspora is coming back, they do need foundations. They do need people to be helping them to stand up and to helping them to realize the ideology. Maybe they come in with passion and too many ideas, but if you guide them, they could benefit to the continent much, much better. So I hope they can get the guidance and they will come back with African ideology, not Western ideology. That's what I will leave there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mohammed. You know, nobody is going to solve these problems for us. Nobody is going to solve these problems for us. But I think that one of the things that you've said, which is so important with regard to our diaspora, is for people to realize that yes, we have a lot of problems. We have a lot of challenges. We have a lot of things not going very well. But that does not mean that we do not have competence, that we do not have knowledge, that we do not have an understanding of our own problems. We have built systems, as we have discussed earlier in the conference, that have not enabled the most talented to come to the forefront, the most creative, the most innovative to come for the forefront. But those people are there. And I think that the diaspora's big job is, one, to understand that they must partner with those who are on the ground. They must be in partnership. They must work together with those who are on the ground if they hope to find solutions to our very, very complex problems. I'm going to open up now to the chat and allow people to ask questions. The first person that I'm going to ask to have admitted in is Mpako Fualeng, who has had the hand up for quite some time. If my colleagues can admit Mpako so that she can ask her question. Mpako? I think I also see Babacar John. Okay, also admit Babacar. So let me see if Mpako has been able to get into the conversation. Babacar John, can you admit him, please, so he can ask his question?
I think they have to unmute themselves.
Yes.
Permit.
Yes.
You can unmute.
Or they can put their question in the chat or Q&A to save time.
Hello, Kat. This is Baba speaking.
Yes.
Maybe what we can do while we're still waiting for them to unmute,
Okay.
we can read those questions that are already in the chat. The
Okay.
first one is
yes.
from, yeah, okay. The first one is from Kamara Eni Amogu, and the question is directed to Dr. Obi. She says, speaking specifically to Nigeria, Dr. Obi, it is clear that the incompetence and incapability in our government are much too deep-rooted to continue to depend on it changing to move forward. As a young person, the situation looks incredibly hopeless. What can the common citizens do to drive growth and development forward? So this is a question. Thank you.
I love the question. And as Ka knows, I spent some months out in Berlin at the Robert Bosch Academy, precisely trying to figure out how to get us out of what really amounts to a very depressing situation. And it meant that I was interrogating what I call fixed politics. I was looking at the nexus between politics and economic performance of countries on the team, especially through the prism of Nigeria. And that research enabled me to come to what I call the triangular pillars of democracy. The triangular pillars of democracy basically show three things in, an equilateral triangle, meaning that the three things are equally important. So the first thing that you must have in order for a democracy that then leads to good governance to exist is that you must have empowered and engaged electorate at the left base of the triangle. And at the right base of the triangle, you need to have value-based political class, that is your politicians. And then at the top of the triangle, the angle at the top, you have to have what we call constitutional, legislative, legal, and regulatory environment or context that supports a rule of law based interaction between the two actors at the base in a way that is fair, in a way that is transparent, in a way that is based on justice. And so you using the triangular pillars of democracy to evaluate our democracies across the continent, well, what I found was that most of our democracies fall on the spectrum of what I call monopolistic democracies. Monopolistic democracies because the political class, the angle of the political class, pushes away any kind of influence of the electorate. So the electorate is weak, fragmented, not capable of influencing positive outcomes for the improvement of society. And the regulatory context is under the absolute possession in many cases of the political class. And so they've pocketed the regulatory context so that there is no form of accountability. And they even lack the competence where they are willing to do something. They are undermined. So it means that the only angle that can at least find the incentive to do anything about repairing a broken democratic political system is the electorate. Within the electorate, there must emerge a subgroup of people maybe the diaspora, some of the people at home, the people in the villages, the people in the towns, the people in professions, in trade, in anything, but people who are minded to the fact that the society is underperforming. And this is not sustainable, according, based on the word of our sister, Dr. Mohammed. Society cannot stay underperforming forever. At some point, it collapses. And that's what we see that happened in Somalia, or some of the other countries we've seen elsewhere in the world. So the citizens, at the end of the day, are the ones that must take the responsibility. Somebody needs to take responsibility. It's not going to be your politician. They have no incentive for it to change. They are comfortable to hand over to the next the performance that benefits them. So we must get back to the root entity that can do something, and it's the citizens in collective action. The citizens in collective action is what Ka has been trying to achieve since she entered into it. The thing that we need to understand, that majority of our citizens fall in the cluster of the poor. Their productivity is so much lower than anything you can imagine. So any kind of money waved in their presence can sway their decision. And so we need to begin to think of how we engage with our citizens as citizens collective to push them from a place of, ignoble unproductivity to a place where they are more productive and therefore can earn much more income, even outside of the activities of the nation state. They can earn more. And then we, together with that capacity to be more productive, we add political consciousness, meaning political literacy programs for them. When we do all of these things, when we do that, and then we also begin to grow a new class of politicians through a deliberate training that helps us to train people who have character, competence, and capacity and can run governmental systems. And then when we collectively engage the political and the constitutional, legal and regulatory context and push for the reforms that are necessary in a systemic and organic way, we can actually move from being despondent and feeling that we can do nothing to being in a place where we find that together we can do so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Obi. And let me take Babacar Dion, whose hand has been up for some time. Babacar.
Yes, hello.
Hello. Go ahead with your question. We can hear you.
Yes, hello. Do you hear me?
Yes, yes, we hear you very well.
Okay. Hi, everybody, and hi, all the participants. I'm Abubakar John calling from Dakar in Senegal.
Okay, speak a little bit more loudly and closer to your mic, please. Yeah.
So my question is that what do you think about the efficiency of African institutions like ECOWAS? If we take into account the fact that their presence didn't make possible to prevent a crisis without our sub-regional space. Do you think that they are?
We unfortunately cannot hear you.
Yes.
For some reason, your voice, your tone is so low.
Yeah.
It's impossible to hear you.
Yeah. I heard you were saying, what do we think of the efficiency of ECOWAS, its ability to prevent crises?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Do you think that they are really strong in order, to prevent crises?
Yes. Okay, great. Thank you, Babacar. I'm going to note that question down and give the floor to Bokwe Burnley. Bokwe?
Hello, distinguished ladies. Can you hear me?
Yes, very much.
Yes, we hear you very well.
Okay, first, I just want to say I'm so excited. I've got to contain myself because I am thrilled to see women of excellence, passion, and leadership like you people taking the forefront in fighting for our children, fighting for the continent. It's amazing. So I am so excited. And I want to say that I have been listening and I'm in agreement with just about everything that everybody has said, because we need a collective of all those ingredients together for things to work. So I just wonder though, I wanted to add something. I want to talk about the role of the diaspora in all of these things that we are doing. I have a vested interest because I am in the diaspora. So, and I'm passionate because I think that we could contribute in some ways, but obviously I really want to know what could be done better to have more institutionalized structures so that the brain drain that the continent of Africa has experienced because of the statistics that I'm sure you are all aware of the diaspora from Africa that are out here, you know, so that that brain drain can be reversed. Because just like a distinguished sister was just saying, that we cannot just do things in a haphazard way. So what can be done to really put protocols, organized protocols in place to facilitate this return, this reverse of this process of brain drain? Because we are looking at the Friends of African organizations and institutions that would want to and are doing a lot to help Africa. But the truth is that there's statistics that show from as far back as 2010 that diaspora remittances to the continent of Africa was way above the collective aid that Africa received from humanitarian organizations. So it means that the diaspora, apart from having that financial power, has also intellectual capacity, social capacity, and so many other things that could contribute. But just like one of our other learned sisters had said, if everybody is just going to their village and taking care of their immediate family, of course it helps, but we don't gather the momentum that we could gather if things were more organized and structured and we worked together. So I don't know, my sisters, what we can do about that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bokwe. Great question. I will continue and go to Mpako Fualeng. Mpako?
Yes, good afternoon. Do you hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
Thank you very much for this conference, and let me express how enthused I am to listen to these great ladies, and also for the vision that they shared with us on these issues. I would like to ask a question. I heard about the need for local ownership, the need for sustainability, the need for inclusion, no letting anyone behind, making sure that the youth, women are empowered, are taken into consideration. And also I heard about the need for, yes, strong institutions, but also visionary leaders. And it's been quite some years now that we've talked about the need for strong leaders, visionary leaders on the African continent. And I'm really wondering, how do we build those leaders? Where do we find those leaders who help us transform our states? I particularly like the definition of the state that was given before, but we should not forget that these are states that we inherited and we made them ours, and we're trying to domesticate them. But we also agree that those states are not yet enshrined and do not yet reflect what our societies are, and why we're still struggling, and we have these conflicts and the social contracts that are not there fully consolidated yet. So
Great.
I'm wondering, how do we find those leaders, those visionary leaders? Thank you.
Thank you, Paco. And I will take the last two before I go back to the panel. Cham, Joshua, you have the floor. Joshua, Cham, you can unmute your mic.
Yeah,
Okay.
that would be the best option.
Okay, go ahead, Kalis. Go ahead while we're waiting for Joshua.
Hello, everyone. Can you get me?
Yes.
Yes, Kalis, we can get you.
Okay. Good evening. I am Kalis Vishiti from Cameroon. It is such an honor for me to be amongst such a great panelist. Like, I've never imagined myself being among such great women. Okay. My question goes to Dr. Deco, and I would like to ask that for people in the diaspora, I know of people who have acquired knowledge and would like to bring about positive change in their countries, like in the communities they originate from. But the system of government in their countries would not let them bring about such change. So I've always been wondering, should they change their focus on, should they leave their countries to develop other countries, or what can they do to penetrate such systems in order for their ideas to become realities? Thank you.
Okay, great. Kalis Vishti, just to let you all know, I think Kalis is about 17 years old, and she's part of a wonderful program called Open Dreams here in Cameroon. And I think her is part of... Hello, Joshua, your mic is open. 1 second, yeah. So Kalis is part of a program called Open Dreams, and I think such a program speaks a little bit to Mpako's question, where do we find the leaders? There are all kinds of programs already on the ground, identifying young leaders, training young leaders, giving them opportunities, finding mentors for them. So, you know, I think the diaspora would be amazed to know what is happening on the ground. I think one of the things it's important for diaspora to do is to do your due diligence and find out what is actually happening in the country, because so much is going on. Very, very quickly, I have more hands coming up, but very quickly, I will go to Joshua Cham. Joshua? Okay, Joshua's not there. Abuno, Olive, very quick question. Your mic is...
la. Hello?
Yes? Yes, Joshua,
Good.
Go ahead. Quickly.
Good evening to all the panelists in the house. I acknowledge your wonderful contribution.
Great, thank you. Can you go very quickly to your question?
Okay, yes, madam. I have sent in a message, but particularly I wanted to talk about institutions hoping the private sector and companies that are in the African continent play a greater role. So I am looking at it as from the aspect of better management, because as a professional in the field, I have observed that the corporate world in Africa lacks there is a lot of mismanagement, and that new companies come up, and from the onset you see they are going so very well, gains are high and everything goes well, but in less than no time you see that the companies fall, and this directly have an impact on those who are working there. So I am thinking that putting in place better management system, and if strategies and people like you can bring up ways in which African companies particularly can be advised on management, taking into account particularly the human resources, because companies most often fall because the human resource is not well managed, forgetting that yes, they play a greater role to help manage the risk. So I think you can come in at the sector of advising companies on how better management systems can be put in place.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going to take the last two comments, and please be as brief as possible. Olive Abuno.
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I am not hearing Olive. I am not hearing Olive. Valentine Tata, turn on your mic. Go ahead, Valentine, unmute and go ahead.
Yes, good evening to everybody.
Good evening.
Yes, this is Dr. Valentine from Cameroon. I'm very happy to take part in this wonderful session. And I must commend already the wonderful efforts and the laudable efforts of our Honorable Kawala. I must say I'm happy to see you again and to know that you are doing very fine. My question goes to you. Now, what do we do when it comes to proper management, that is effective management of this institution, our African institutions, taking into consideration our African context? You know, our context is somehow not well shaped. It has some hidden potentials which at times are not clear to the man in the street. I don't know, from your own appraisal, from your general view, what do you think are the better ways by which we could manage such our structure? Thank you.
Thank you. Great question. And the last one is from Halidou Demba. Hello, Halidou. Glad to have you online.
Yeah, hello. I'm also very happy to see you again. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well, Halidou.
Okay, thank you very much. Unfortunately, I am speaking to you in a darkness environment because the electricity has gone here in my area since 2 p.m. and we are expecting it to come back in the next 30 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to seize the opportunity to congratulate you. Congratulate strategy team for what you have achieved so far, and also to thank and congratulate the panelists with their eloquent presentations.
Thank you.
I have just one single comment, and I am very, I agree with the relationship between institution building leadership with the development of our continent. But I think that institution buildings and leadership are not enough if they are not built on values. Because if you look at democracy, where it was successful, institutions and political culture in the democratic context are built on the values around which there is a minimum consensus among the people of the nations. For example, the freedom of speech, a minimum respect of liberty, individual liberties, etc., etc. Here in our continent, we have the impression that we build institutions, we copy from other people, but there is no, there is no value on the ground to make the institution sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Halidou. And I will just add one question that came in by email before we ever started, which came from a very good friend of mine, Desiree Dietvost. I don't know if she's still online. And her question was, there are so many talented people in Africa. And yet in the institutions, we have the impression that these talented people are not there, or even when they are there, they're not at the right place doing the right job. How do we get talented people into institutions in Africa? So I'm going to just let the panelists take a stab at some of these questions. Go ahead and answer the ones that speak to you. We had a question about how effective is ECOWAS in preventing crisis. Dr. Obi, you are in ECOWAS. Maybe, maybe that one goes to you. We had a question about how do we build systems. So regarding human resources, we have a question about how do we build systems to stop brain drain and reverse it. We also have a question about how do we improve the management of systems, even up to the private sector institutions to be able to better manage people. Then we had a question about how do we build leaders, the kinds of leaders that can transform our states. And then there was a question about improving management of institutions as a whole. And finally, Halidu's comment, but which also goes to a question that how do we structure our institutions so that they are value-based, so that they are built on a foundation of values, and we are not just copying, mimicking institutions from other places without founding them on our own values. So let me go to Dr. Obi first. I see also Deco has been nodding and taking notes there. You'll come up right after Deco. Dr. Obi? Your mic.
Thank you very much, Carl. The audience has been very engaged, and that's an amazing thing that we gained today. I have learned from them as much as we also have spoken. ECOWAS and its capacity in preventing crisis. I think that, if you looked at data, it is to the advantage of ECOWAS. When you compare the percentage of states undergoing fragility and crisis in ECOWAS in 2020 to say 2010 or to say 2000, the decline has been very steep and it has been sharp. But not descending into absolute collapse of governance is not equivalent to being stable. And so ECOWAS has an important role to go beyond some of the basic political progress that it has made. Just that treaty that outlaws militarization in the sub-region is a classic gain that ECOWAS has made compared to other regions of the continent. And that was what informed the Continental Treaty at the AU that now outlawed any governance that is not democratic. So we can praise ECOWAS for that. In terms of member states, the member state relationship is still not a define of the participation of citizens. And so governments speak to governments, and the integration that is necessary, even through businesses, through citizen to citizen, that's not happening as fast as it should. And that's really a big disadvantage, because ECOWAS could be much more in the performance of, in the building of an economic zone, a real economic zone of prosperity. We're missing that. Why is economic zone of prosperity important in a conversation on crisis? People tend to not fight when they are comfortable. So the more that we can build prosperity, the more that we can build opportunities, the better it is for ECOWAS, and the more that we can, prevent crisis. The second question was a question on the diaspora and how we could reverse the brain drain. I wish I could tell you that we should just, do a law saying people shouldn't go. That would be wrong. People are going because there are economic incentives driving that movement. Now, the movement is toward environments that would enable people to gain more skills, where they can find better jobs and be better rewarded for their effort. So what that says to us is, if we want to keep our best talents at home, we need to build governance systems that work so that our private sector can thrive. If I look, I said it on a panel recently that most Africans that are abroad would rather be home. I know that for a fact. You know, in any 10 Africans that you're discussing with, where would you rather be if things were good? They would say home. So they really are not in those lands because they love those lands that much. It is because some imperatives are driving them. So we need to improve governance, and we need to understand that no matter where people are located today, there are connectivities that enable them to support the development of their society. I can speak to this because I developed the diaspora program at the World Bank, and it has grown enormously, and also within countries to have the diaspora policies. Our sister talked about finding visionary leaders. Well, the truth is, as Ka said, we already have little programs here and there trying to train young leaders to emerge, but I think that we need massive scale. I said today earlier on Twitter that Nigerians pay more attention to who they hire to run their grocery shop compared to who they hire to run the local government, to run the state government, to run the federal government. That is a misnomer. We need to be interested in how we raise public leaders. Public leadership is a major hindrance to our development, and we now have to be more intentional and strategic in the way that we build systems of training of public leaders from the base to the top. And that's why we are setting up what we call the Unconventional School of Politics, Policy, and Governance, and we want to achieve scale. So we're going to be graduating 500 such people every 6 months, with emphasis on young people and children, young people and women, who have mostly been the ones excluded from public leadership on our continent. Then our brother said something about, how do we sustain this building of institutions? And I would say to him that, look, the demand side of governance has been asleep on our continent. The citizens are the demand side of governance. All that has happened is you have an excessive activity of the supply side of governance producing nothing, and yet there is no pressure on them to produce better outcomes. The day that the demand side of governance wakes up, institutions will be forced to produce better results, because ultimately it's about results. Governance has to produce results. It has to be that people's standard of living are better, less children are out of school, less women are dying at childbirth, less accidents are happening because roads are in total disaster, and all of those critical indicators that then lead to a more productive life for the people of the country and the continent and the businesses that operate, because we can't attract the businesses until we have this kind of enabling that leads to their competitiveness. And finally, I agree with our brother. The values that underpin institutions must be there. How do you get the values, the shared values? The constitutional process of many countries shut out the voices of the citizens. We now need to look at countries' constitution and say what process led to what, because the constitution, that's the rallying point of the aspiration of any society. How did that process emerge? What was the contribution of the people to its emergence? The process is as important as the content, as the substance, and we need to pay more attention to that. What we need to do is to pay attention so that we can replace the dominant culture. The dominant culture today, the dominant political culture, is one that subordinates the public good, the common good, to the individual and narrow interests of the people who have possession of power. And we need to change that dramatically. And it requires the citizens rising up in collective action, as I said previously. Thank you very much. It's been an amazing time with all of you. I've learned so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Obi. Collective action, the demand side of government being able to demand what it pays for, because the other thing we forget is that we as citizens pay we are actually the ones who finance these people who are in power, and therefore we have rights to demand that they deliver and produce results. We are going already to the rounding up statements as we answer the final questions. Dr. Mohammed, over to you.
Oh, thank you. Is there when we're gonna have African continent, I will vote for you, Dr. Obi, to be our president. So maybe I can become Nigerian citizen so I can vote for you. This is the power.
I will vote for you, my dear. We need Somalia to come back big time. So I would vote for you, Dr. Mohammed. Let's do it.
It's the later you discuss that, you know, our governments are shutting down our society. In Somalia, it's a double leg. We have Shabab shutting us when we even get to discuss these kind of issues. What I wanted just to mention about diasporas, I think the best example is Ghana, the country that investing heavily on diasporas and as a government bringing as a tourism and creating a platform for diasporas to come. As the individual, you could do as much as possible, so you don't wait. I like Thomas Sankara's code you tweeted a couple of days ago. We have to be mad enough to create a new kind of Africa. So you don't have to wait something. So we need to create our own thing. And the beauty in Africa is we can leapfrog. We don't have to take old traditions that failed for centuries. We can create a new institutions that sustain and very energetic and very technology advanced and even inclusive, that we have all our citizens part of it. So I think it's a time to be a little bit mad and a little bit stronger and collectively support each other. Diaspora, you have to come back. That's it. You have to learn in hard way. You don't wait until silver spoon we feed you. Just to come, tune in, and be part of continent rebuilding. That's what I will tell you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Deco. Diaspora, you have to jump into the pool. And I think one thing is important that we have to say also to our diaspora, because unfortunately in Cameroon, and I noticed in several other countries, I think all of us here are believers in people standing up. We are believers in people demanding, but we are believers that this should be done without violence. So we also ask our diaspora to stop financing war. We have not solved a single problem in Africa with violence. And we see more and more of our diasporas. We understand that they are frustrated. We understand they want the change quickly, but the solution is not, it's never has been violence for Africa. If violence was a solution, Africa would be in a much better place by now. So the history has taught us that violence doesn't work, and we would ask our diaspora, the energy and the finances you are putting into violence, please put it into the non-violent leaders that you see in our countries. Please, please, please. Ambassador Mula Mula, a look at those questions and a final round-up statement from you.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much. I also want to thank the participants for a very engaging conversation, because we didn't want it to be a monologue. At least we get to hear. I've been reading in the chats. There are also some very good questions that maybe because of time we can't pick them up. But let me say one thing, of course, about the diaspora. One of the participants mentioned, how do you institutionalize this aspect of the diaspora? One, at the continental level, just wanted to remind you that the diaspora, in terms of the African Union, is recognized as the 6th department of the African Union. But then, of course, I was also say part of the diaspora. I've been in the US after my retirement. But then the diaspora, and as what Carl said, most of them, of course, like those who are funding for violence, I tell them, you are finding violence, you are finding wars. These wars are fought on the ground. You are in the comfort zone while people on the ground, they are dying. But then you live in this comfort of the Western ones. I said, I mean, you have to get out from from that shelter of saying we are fighting for the common cause, while you see that those who are suffering on the ground. So how you connect the support with the people on the ground, be able to be on the, you have to have your foot on the ground to understand what you are really actually supporting. Because they just live in this, most of them in this superfluous world, but also use the machinery that have already, institutional machinery that have been already established at the national level. For example, in Tanzania, of course, we have the Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Foreign Affairs as a specific department of the diaspora. And of course, there was a move to have the provision in the new constitution that recognizes the role of the diaspora. So it depends how you make good use of these already existing initiatives and the goodwill that is there in some of the countries. Of course, some of the countries, but then at least you have the African Union. You can play a role through the African Union. I wanted also to talk about the leadership. How do you get the visionary leaders? Again, I want to say that I teach leadership, but I'm saying no one can teach you leadership. It starts with you, but you can learn about leadership by looking at the role model, looking at the car, looking at Dr. Obi, Dr. Finn. So now there are many initiatives. 2 days ago, we had a big conference, which was about intergenerational dialogue, intergenerational leadership, that we have to have honest conversation about where we have achieved, where we have gone wrong, and that we are now on the 11th hour. So we cannot continue to blame those who were before you, and then you do the same things. So for us, I think this is also part, that's why I decided, I accepted to participate in this. It's also part of that conversation of intergenerational dialogue. I know most of those who are asking questions, they look young. So I hope you are listening, and that you need to have self-awareness. You have to have tenacity. You have to have the resilience, but more important, get out of your comfort zone to sacrifice. Because the revolutionaries of today, or the revolution of yesterday, you heard about, you have the Mandelas and what? They started at very early age, but how much they sacrifice to get where maybe South Africa is on today. So I give this challenge to those, I say, nobody will give you leadership. It starts with you. And finally, I would like just to, I don't know what our 17-year-old Carlis asked, but I was so happy that we have, this is what we call generation equality, that you don't fear to speak, or you don't want to participate, you fear to participate because there's Dr. Obi, there's Ambassador Mulamula. No, this is what the campaign now with the UN Women is to have generation equality and have honest dialogue. So thank you again, Carl, for organizing this very important conference and conversation, and I hope it continues. We don't want to make it an event, we want it to have to continue, and we have, as you always say, it's a luta continua. The struggle continues. Thank you very much.
A luta continua, very much so. Ambassador Mulamula, thank you so much. I think for all of our participants, we have talked about it all, the pillars of leadership based on values. We have talked about building institutions that have policies, that have systems. But I think most importantly, we've talked about ownership by citizens. Citizens demanding that these institutions, these states work for them, deliver results for them. And we've made it very clear that is also our work here on the ground, my work both politically and in our company strategies, is that citizenship work takes time. It takes dedication. It takes being willing to embrace complexity And it takes being willing to embrace the fact that you will fail many, many times before you succeed. And so I think that as Africans, though, that context we saw in the very beginning is a context that we have no choice. I think several of the speakers said it. We just have to do it. Nobody is coming to save us. Nobody is coming to do it for us. If we do not do it, we will be responsible for our own collapse. So we must jump in. We must grab all of this complexity, all of this history, all of this pain from the past, because there's a lot of pain, but we must do it in a way that we can build institutions that are based on values, that are owned by our people, and that produce results for ourselves and for Africa. I want to say a huge thank you to my sisters. Each one of them is very, very special to me. I'm so happy to have been able to connect with them to prepare this conference because all of them are people who inspire me, who encourage me. Dr. Obi calls me the troublemaker and encourages me on making trouble. I remember my very first conversation with Deco and how she said, okay, now I've listened to you and so on. What do we do for our continent? How do we take this to scale? Ambassador Mula Mula and I worked so many years together to build up an institution that, you know, she produced fantastic results. Today, we are looking at the sustainability of that institution, how it can continue to produce results. So I thank each of you personally to what you've contributed to my life, to what you've contributed to strategies and everything that we do here. And it is a celebration. So to close things up, I'm inviting all of my colleagues to join us, those who are in the office. We are on remote work, so some people are not here. So please do join those who are around, so that you all can see and join our celebration.
Abata. Abata, yes. Abata, Balele.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Wonderful.
Bye, Abata, Abalele.
Yes.